My friends, good day to you all. Many of you have contacted me about the recent incident involving Air India's Boeing 787. It's all over Indian and European media and social media. What's it about? February 1st, we're at Heathrow Airport. There's a Boeing 787 from the said company full of passengers. It's getting ready to take off for India. It's a long haul flight. And then what happens is that the pilots notice twice that the main switch of the left engine, which is a big switch that allows you to shut down the engine, well, what it does is that it practically comes back. You just have to touch it and it goes back to the off position. Of course, this causes the engine to shut down twice, so we have proof of the truth of this incident. We have a document written by the pilots. There is a document circulating. We have the text that says first. First, it says that the plane pulls to the left. That's probably something they noticed during the flight. We need to see what's going on. Maybe a rudder trim that wasn't completely set to neutral, that isn't aligned after the second position. They say this story that on the ground they had this problem twice. So this story, of course, stretches the limits of credibility. And in more ways than one, that is, we have to remember that we're in a context that is emotionally and politically charged. Of course, this is a reminder of the Air India 171 accident in Ahmedabad last year. That plane was taking off and it was actually heading to the United Kingdom, and then it crashed. All the occupants died and so on. Then there were many casualties on the ground. They crashed into a medical school. Later, we learned that the engines had been shut down under circumstances that are still being investigated. But we're getting closer and closer to a deliberate act, even though, well, the word is taboo in India. So what's happening is that today the Air India crews, and you can understand them, right? On a human level, they have a conflicted relationship with that plane. That happens in all airlines when they have a serious accident. Well, we'll see that in the months and weeks to come. There are often planes making emergency landings, pilots refusing to take off, incidents that skyrocket simply because everyone is nervous about this plane, so that's completely normal. Let me remind you of a rather extraordinary story. It was Eastern Flight 301. It must have happened, I'm telling you, roughly in the 1970s. Don't quote me on the date, but I think I'd bet my money on 1975, give or take 2 or 3 years. And actually, it's an Eastern plane that crashes in Florida, killing some of its occupants. And what does the company do? Since the aircraft isn't completely destroyed, they recover a number of parts, components that aren't major structural elements. They will be recovered and used on other planes. There is a very well documented story where on other planes of the same type that received those parts, some crews started to see things, some pretty strange things. I'm telling you exactly as they were told, and I know it's something that's pretty hard to hear. For example, you have a flight attendant. At night, the lights are off, the plane is flying over the Atlantic, and everyone is asleep. She goes to the galley to make a coffee at the captain's request, and then what does she see? She sees a flight attendant standing there looking at her, even though she knows that one died in the accident, so she has no reason to be there. There have been cases, for example, where someone in uniform is seen sleeping in the last row that's supposed to be empty. On that flight, the person tries to talk to him to wake him up. She goes to call her colleagues, and when they arrive, he's no longer there. There was a case where someone reported, and these are very serious people, they're crew members, people who are medically monitored, they're not people who are losing their minds. At night, she opens the curtain of a window and she sees someone on the other side looking at her. And it's the captain of the flight that crashed. The captain is dead. And you can clearly see that logically and materially it doesn't make sense. If you have a plane that's at cruising altitude, flying at Mach 0.80, it's unlikely that someone would be outside on the other side looking at you. It's not possible, especially since we know that the person already died a few months ago. All right, so sometimes there are conflicted relationships that develop with certain types of equipment after accidents. That's well documented. Imagine being a pilot or flight attendant, all that. And then you see your colleagues you worked with yesterday, you see a plane you flew last week crash on television. Imagine the shock that can be. So these crews sometimes see things, they're acting in good faith, but they see things that an objective person has trouble reproducing and sometimes even has trouble believing, to tell you the truth. So once they had this problem with the switch, what's surprising is that they decided to head to India, even though you would have expected otherwise. The engine stops twice in a row, the switch doesn't hold. What do? You go to India, you take a long haul flight, it doesn't make sense. What did they do? They didn't replace it as far as I know. They just held it in place the whole time before leaving. They asked for a hair tie from a flight attendant to hold it in place. None of this makes any sense. So that's the first point. Second point, the incident was made public not through the usual official channels like the Indian Directorate General of Civil Aviation or Air India or others. No, it was made public by a very marginal, little known association. Isn't that what suddenly triggered the media storm we're talking about today? So there was no official statement. The plane was grounded, kept on the ground in India, that particular one, for analysis. They asked the others to check the fuel valves. The press is getting involved, so let me tell you. This story stretches the limits of credibility into an area that makes me personally very uncomfortable. So that's quite an extraordinary claim for which you would expect equally extraordinary proof, like a video, for example. We have no tangible evidence, just a written pilot report, and we're waiting for authorities to confirm. Some Indian media are now claiming the Americans, National Transportation Safety Board, and FAA are protecting Boeing. I'm very critical of institutions. You know me from other channels, but we have to be fair. I haven't seen that the National Transportation Safety Board, for example, has a history of protecting Boeing. The National Transportation Safety Board or even the FAA have had no qualms. When Lion Air crashed, Ethiopian Air, the 737 MAX, they grounded it for a very long time. They revoked its airworthiness certificate. They didn't say anything. We might make Boeing lose money. The other airlines, like the American Airlines, which use the 787 extensively, didn't receive any instructions to change the switches in question, or to change their procedures, or even to check. There's nothing. Despite the emotion this causes in India and everything else, we still do it. What I'm about to say is a taboo topic. Over there, unfortunately, they're moving towards a voluntary action. Because remember, the plane took off, both engines stopped. We know that the switches were brought back or returned to the off position. With the engines off, the plane keeps moving, gliding. 10 seconds later, there's a desperate attempt to restart the engines, and then the plane hits the houses. And then you know the rest. There's a national tragedy over there. So there you have it, my friends. At this point, I've told you what I think at this stage. I have a lot of doubts about this story. If ever, in the days or weeks to come, we might be contradicted by an investigation, and then afterwards we'll see. We almost said that these pilots were talking nonsense, but in the end they were right. We don't know. It can happen. We have to be careful. So there you go. Thank you, my friends, for your loyalty to this channel. Please subscribe. I'm one of those YouTubers who never says subscribe. Extremely rarely. I know there are people who start a video for 3 minutes. They tell you to subscribe, but you don't. The result is that the subscriber count is practically stuck. So please prove it to me or help me, please. Just by seeing that this work is appreciated when you subscribe to this channel. And then I make other videos. See you very soon.